What if the man who saved your life is the same mafia boss your mother ran from? Tasha thought her biggest problem was a slow Tuesday at the diner, until a mysterious stranger walks in with a tattoo that matches her dead mother's hidden secret. In a single day, her life is shattered. A shocking discovery about her mother's past, a brutal kidnapping, and a rescue by the one man she was told to fear. Vince Moretti, the mafia boss, who also happens to be her father. Get ready for an explosive story of betrayal, secrets, and a daughter's quest for vengeance in a world she never knew existed. You won't believe what happens next. Click subscribe and let's dive into the story of Tasha and the Moretti family. Tasha stood at the counter, wiping down a coffee mug as the diner's usual hum of chatter and clinking plates filled the air. It was a slow Tuesday morning, the kind where time seemed to crawl and the crowd was sparse. She noticed him as soon as he walked in, tall, with dark, brooding eyes that seemed to study everything around him. He wore a black leather jacket, just a bit too polished for a simple diner. But it wasn't his clothes that caught her attention. It was the tattoo on his wrist. The man slid into a booth by the window, his eyes briefly meeting hers. He gave a small nod of acknowledgement before he turned to the menu. His movements were measured, careful, almost calculated. It was the kind of demeanor Tasha had learned to notice, a type of quiet intensity that didn't belong in a place like this. She moved over to his table, a polite smile on her face. "What can I get you today?" Her voice was light, welcoming, though a hint of curiosity flickered in her gaze. The man glanced up, his eyes briefly locking with hers. Something about the moment felt heavier than it should have. "Just coffee," he said in a low voice. He didn't bother to look at the menu. "Coming right up," she said, turning to head to the coffee station. But she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something about him that was out of place. As she poured the coffee into a mug, her eyes wandered back to him. That's when she noticed it again, the tattoo. It was on the inside of his wrist, just below his sleeve. A simple design, but it stirred something in her. She hadn't seen one like it in years, not since she was a little girl. She set the coffee mug down on the tray, trying to push the thought away. But as she walked over to his table, the words slipped from her lips before she could stop them. "My mother has a tattoo just like yours," she said, her voice casual, almost too casual. The man's hand froze just as he was about to pick up the mug. His eyes shot up, suddenly intense. For a split second, Tasha thought she saw something flash across his face, a mix of surprise, confusion, and then something darker like recognition. Her smile faltered slightly as she stood there, waiting for him to speak. His gaze lingered on her for a long moment, and Tasha started to feel a little uneasy. There was a coldness in his eyes now, like she had just crossed some invisible line. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and controlled. "Your mother has a tattoo like mine." Tasha nodded, not sure why she was still standing there. "Yeah. It was something she always kept hidden. She never really talked about it. Her mother had passed away, and since then she had learned to handle everything on her own. But that wasn't what troubled her the most. Even before her mother died, she never saw a single picture of her father. Her mother never spoke about him, never told her the truth. That unanswered question had lived in her mind since childhood, but every time she asked, her mother dismissed it. Now standing in front of this man, something felt different, something felt familiar, and she knew she had to find out the truth. The man didn't answer. He just stared at her, his lips pressing into a thin line. The tension in the air thickened, and for the first time, Tasha felt something was wrong. This man wasn't just some stranger. There was more to him, something that made her words feel far too innocent for the moment they were in. His hand slowly reached for the coffee, but his gaze never left her. "You know," he said quietly, almost to himself, "some things are better left unsaid." Tasha blinked, her heartbeat suddenly picking up. She felt the weight of his words, even though she didn't fully understand them. Without waiting for another response, she turned to leave, but as she did, she glanced back over her shoulder. His eyes were still fixed on her. And this time, she saw it. the flicker of something familiar in his expression, something she couldn't place but felt in her gut. Something that told her this was no ordinary diner interaction. The man is something else entirely, but she will discover the truth, one way or another. She turned away, but the feeling didn't fade. The tattoo, his words, the way his eyes held onto hers, it all stayed with her as she moved toward the kitchen, her mind racing. Tasha didn't think much of the encounter at first. Diner customers came and went, and strange moments were part of the job. But the memory of that man, the look in his eyes when she mentioned the tattoo, lingered far longer than she expected. When her mother was alive, there was always something about her that she couldn't quite understand, her relationships, the way she carried herself, and the constant air of insecurity. Whenever she asked, her mother would simply say she was fine. But after her mother was killed, the truth began to unravel. She realized her mother had been hiding something from her for a long time. Now, she no longer knows who her mother truly was, what association she belonged to, or what forces led to her death. These questions have haunted her for 5 years, and if this is the moment to finally uncover the answers, she will not hesitate. Later that night, as she sat on the worn-out couch of her apartment, Tasha stared at the flickering light of the TV, her thoughts elsewhere. She couldn't stop thinking about the tattoo or about the way the man's expression had changed. She didn't recognize him. She had never seen him around before, but the tattoo, it was too familiar, too much like the one her mother had. Are they family, such as twins or possibly her father? Tasha hadn't thought about her mother's past in years. Sarah had always kept certain parts of her life a mystery. There were pieces of her mother's story that Tasha never fully understood, even growing up. The tattoo was one of those pieces. When she was little, Tasha would see her mother, tattoo, peeking out from the sleeve of her shirt when she rolled up her sleeves to clean or do dishes. The symbol was simple, a small, dark design with swirling lines that wrapped around her wrist. Sarah would never explain it. Whenever Tasha asked, her mother would change the subject, her expression hardening for a brief moment before her soft smile returned. Tasha was too young to question it then, but now, as an adult, she felt that gnawing curiosity again. Why had her mother kept this secret? What did it mean? Tasha closed her eyes, pushing the thought aside, but the weight of it lingered. She tried to concentrate on the mundane, the dishes piled up in the sink, the laundry waiting to be folded, but she couldn't shake the man's face from her mind. There was something dangerous about him, something that told her he was connected to the world her mother had left behind. And yet he seemed to know her mother. The connection was there, buried just beneath the surface. Tasha stood up abruptly, her heart racing. She grabbed her phone and scrolled through the contacts until she found the one name she dreaded calling, Maya, her mother's oldest friend. Maya had always been a little too evasive when it came to her mother's past, but she might know something. The phone rang twice before Maya picked up. "Hello," Maya's voice was calm but sharp, like she was always on edge. "Maya," Tasha said, trying to keep the anxiety out of her voice. "I need to ask you something about Mom." There was a brief silence on the other end before Maya replied. "Tasha, I told you before, there are things you don't need to know. Your mother's past is her past. Why you've asked me about her so many times, and I'm honestly growing weary of your questions. The truth is, I don't know." Maya was the only person truly close to her mother, but Maya always kept secrets. Tasha could sense that Maya was hiding something, yet she refused to give up on her search for answers. Tasha could hear the defensiveness in her voice. "It's about the tattoo," she blurted out before she could stop herself. There was another silence, longer this time. "You're asking about that?" Maya's tone shifted, something softer, almost fearful. "You shouldn't be poking around. You don't know what you're asking about, Tasha." "I saw a man today, a customer at the diner. He had a tattoo. It looked exactly like the one Mom had." Tasha's voice trembled with the weight of her words. "Maya, I need to know the truth. What is it? What does it mean?" That moment made Maya pause. Her instincts told her that Tasha was beginning to uncover the truth piece by piece. Maya wanted to warn her, to protect her, Because if Tasha discovered that her mother had belonged to something dangerous, the very thing that had led to her death, Tasha would surely fight back. And in doing so, she risked losing her own life alongside it. Maya sighed deeply on the other end of the line. It's not just a tattoo, Tasha, it's a symbol. Your mother was involved in something. Something she wanted to keep from you. That tattoo, it's connected to a world you can't understand. A world you don't want to understand. Tasha's heart skipped a beat. A world? What kind of world? What do you mean? Maya's voice dropped to a whisper. You're too young, Tasha. I should have told you sooner, but I didn't want you to get hurt. Your mother was part of the Mafia. She was with Vince Moretti. Tasha's stomach dropped. Vince Moretti, the Mafia boss, she could barely get the words out. Yes, Maya confirmed softly. He was the man your mother loved, the man she ran from. The shock hit Tasha like a wave crashing over her. The pieces were finally falling into place, but the image of the man in the diner, his tattoo, the way he reacted, it all felt too surreal. She had known her mother kept secrets, but this was something she could never have imagined. Maya, is he the same man I saw today? Tasha asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Maya didn't respond immediately. When she did, it was with a finality that made Tasha's heart race. If it was Vince Moretti, then yes, he's back. And Tasha, you need to stay away from him for your own safety. Tasha's mind was spinning. Her mother's past, the Mafia, the tattoo, and now Vince Moretti. The man in the diner had to be connected to all of it, and he had recognized something in her, something she still didn't understand. Tasha tossed and turned in her bed, the weight of Maya's words pressing down on her chest. No matter how many times she shut her eyes, she couldn't escape the image of the man in the diner or the shock of hearing about her mother's ties to the Mafia. It felt like she was living in a nightmare that she couldn't wake up from. She had barely slept. Her thoughts kept racing, darting back to Vince Moretti, the tattoo, and the secrets her mother had kept hidden. Why didn't she tell me? Tasha thought, frustration bubbling inside her. She needed to know more. She had to. The thought of her mother's death, the way she'd never gotten the full story, how the mystery had haunted her for years, drove Tasha out of bed before dawn. She stared out the window, the early light filtering through the blinds, painting the room in a pale, uncertain glow. She wasn't sure how she was going to get the answers she was looking for, but one thing was certain. She couldn't stay in the dark anymore. Tasha grabbed her phone, her fingers shaking slightly as she dialed her work. "Hey, it's Tasha," she said when her manager picked up. "I need the day off. I've got something personal to handle." The manager hesitated, but Tasha's voice was firm, no room for negotiation. "All right, just take care of what you need to." Tasha hung up, the decision made. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Her mind was already on what she needed to do next: find Vince, confront him, and get the truth about her mother, no matter the cost. She couldn't wait anymore. The tattoo, the Mafia, the way he had reacted to her words, they were all connected, and she needed answers. As she stepped out of her apartment, the cool air of the morning hit her face, a stark contrast to the turmoil inside her. She walked quickly, her pace unsteady but determined. She wasn't sure where she was headed, perhaps to find the diner again, maybe to search for clues, or even track down Maya to press for more answers. But as soon as she turned onto the second street, something felt off. She slowed her pace, scanning the street, but the city seemed unusually quiet. Her instincts kicked in. She glanced over her shoulder, her heart picking up pace. Was someone watching her? The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. Tasha kept walking, trying to shake off the feeling that she was being followed. But as she passed the corner of the street, she saw them. Two men, their faces hidden by the hoods of their jackets, walking just a few paces behind her. It wasn't just her imagination. They were following her. Her breath quickened as she turned down a side street, then another, trying to lose them in the maze of alleyways and narrow lanes. But the men kept pace, not in a rush, but certainly intent on staying close. Panic began to settle in her chest. She glanced around. looking for a place to hide, somewhere to regroup. She spotted a car park ahead. She ran, her steps quick and frantic, hopping to lose them in the maze of parked cars. Her heart pounded in her ears, but just as she thought she might make it, a figure appeared in front of her, blocking her path. Before she could react, two more figures emerged from the shadows. The men grabbed her, pulling her into the darkness of the car park. Tasha struggled, kicking and screaming, but their grip was unyielding. They forced her into one of the cars, and just as she tried to make a break for it, something sharp pressed against her neck. A cloth, soaked in something, was thrown over her face. She gasped for air, trying to fight against the darkness that clouded her vision. The world spun, her thoughts becoming disoriented. She struggled against them, but the cloth pressed tighter, making it harder to breathe. Her limbs grew heavy, her vision blurry. The last thing she remembered before everything went black was the feeling of her body being shoved into the back of the car, her hands pinned tightly to her sides. When Tasha regained consciousness, the first thing she noticed was the cold. Her body felt stiff, and the sensation of her hands being bound sent a wave of panic through her chest. She tugged at her wrists, trying to free them, but the ropes were tight, digging into her skin. Her surroundings were dark and silent, save for the distant hum of machinery. The smell of oil, concrete, and something damp filled the air. Slowly, her eyes adjusted, and she could make out the faint outlines of metal beams and what appeared to be old warehouse equipment. It was a warehouse, a forgotten, abandoned place. Her heart raced as she fought against the restraints, but the more she struggled, the more hopeless it seemed. Her mind was spinning, trying to process everything: her kidnapping, the men who had taken her, and most of all, why. "Where am I?" she whispered to herself, her voice hoarse. But there was no answer, only the echo of her own breath in the cold, empty space. Tasha's eyes slowly fluttered open. The pain hit her almost immediately. Her head throbbed with an intensity she couldn't quite describe, and her wrists felt like they were on fire from the tight ropes binding them. She blinked rapidly, trying to make sense of where she was, but the dim light around her made it hard to focus. All she could tell was that she was in a cold, bleak place. The walls around her seemed to hum with the sound of old machinery, and the faint smell of oil and rust filled the air. She tried to move, but the pain in her neck and back kept her still. Her body was aching all over. She could hear distant footsteps, and then, out of nowhere, a woman appeared before her. Tasha's heart raced. Who was she? The woman was dressed in dark clothing, her face hidden by a mask, but her presence was undeniable. The silhouette of her figure was sharp, her movements deliberate, and she was holding a large gun, the barrel gleaming in the low light. Tasha's breath caught in her throat, her body tense with fear. Before she could even react, the woman stepped forward with surprising speed and slapped her hard across the face. The sound of the slap echoed in the empty room. Tasha's face burned, her cheek throbbing from the force. She stared up at the masked woman, too stunned to speak at first, but the anger surged through her like a tidal wave. "Well," the woman said, her voice cold and calculating, "you wanted to know who killed your mother, right? Now you get to meet me, face to face." Tasha's eyes widened, her mind racing as the pain from the slap lingered. The words hit her like a freight train. Her mother. The same woman who had kept so many secrets from her, secrets that she'd never fully understood. Tasha's heart pounded in her chest, but she forced herself to hold her ground, to not show fear. She wasn't going to give in so easily. The woman took a step closer, the weight of the gun in her hand making the air feel even heavier. Tasha's gaze flickered around, trying to make sense of the situation. Who were these people? How did they know about her conversation with Maya? Her mind was spinning with questions, but every single one felt like it was slipping through her fingers. There was no time for answers now. "Who are you?" Tasha's voice was hoarse, but it carried the weight of her defiance. "What do you want from me?" The woman's lips curled into a slight smile, though it was hidden beneath the mask. She took a moment before responding, her tone dripping with disdain. "You think I'm just going to explain everything to you? You think you're in control here?" She stepped closer, her heels clicking menacingly against the floor. You're nothing but a pawn, Tasha, a little girl playing in a game that's way too big for you. Tasha's jaw clenched. She was trembling from both fear and the anger that was rising inside her. She had been through too much to back down now. I don't care who you are, she spat, her voice low but steady. The least you can do is kill me. Fine, do it. But I want you to know this. If you give me a chance to fight back, I will tear you apart. There was a moment of stunned silence. The men in the room, who had been standing off to the side, watching the exchange, suddenly burst into laughter. The sound of it was cruel, mocking, and it made Tasha's blood boil. You hear that, guys? One of them sneered, his voice laced with amusement. She thinks she can take us on, he snickered. Just like her mother, huh? All talk and no fight. The woman looked at him briefly, her gaze hardening before she turned back to Tasha. You're brave. I'll give you that, she said, her voice dripping with venom. But don't mistake courage for stupidity. You have no idea what you're up against. Tasha's heart was racing, but she wasn't going to show them weakness. She wasn't going to let them see how afraid she was. You think I'm afraid of you, she said, staring directly at the woman, her eyes fierce. You might have killed my mother, but I'm not her, and if I get out of this, you'll regret underestimating me. The men in the room laughed even harder now, but the woman's eyes narrowed, as though considering Tasha's words. She stepped back, a cold smile playing at the corners of her lips. You think this is a joke? One of the men spoke up, his voice dark with amusement. He walked toward Tasha, a cruel grin stretched across his face. We should just waste her like we did her mother. But the woman held up her hand, stopping him in his tracks. No, she said sharply, her voice laced with authority. Not yet, we wait. Her voice was icy, final. The girl's not as weak as she looks. Let's see how long she can keep this up. The man chuckled but didn't move. Suit yourself. I think we should just finish it. Let her join her mother. Tasha's pulse quickened. She could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. As if to punctuate the moment, one of the men grabbed a kettle of hot water and without warning splashed it across her face. The searing heat hit her like a bolt of lightning, and she gasped, her skin burning as the water dripped down her face, leaving a trail of agony behind it. Still tough, the man taunted, his grin widening. Tasha could barely catch her breath, her head spinning from the pain. She forced her eyes open, even as the hot water stung her skin. She wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She wasn't going to break. The woman with the mask took a step back, watching Tasha closely. You've got guts, I'll give you that, but guts won't save you, not here, not now. Tasha swallowed hard, her voice trembling but fierce. You're wrong. I'll fight until my last breath. The woman regarded her for a long moment, then gave a slight nod. We'll see about that, she said coldly. And with that, the tension in the room grew thicker, each moment hanging heavy in the air as Tasha stared back at her captors, her mind set on surviving, on finding a way out, no matter the cost. The tension in the air was unbearable. The laughter of the men, the cold smile of the woman with the mask, it all felt like the calm before a storm. Tasha was struggling to hold onto her defiance, to stand her ground despite the pain coursing through her body from the hot water. The men laughed louder now, mocking her as they enjoyed her discomfort. But just as Tasha was beginning to doubt herself, the world around her exploded. A single shot rang out, followed by chaos. The sound of the bullet hitting one of the men behind her made Tasha freeze. She didn't have time to react before another shot echoed through the warehouse. The woman in front of her whipped around, eyes wide in confusion, as another man was struck down. More shots rang out, and the room descended into chaos as the four men who had been taunting her dropped to the ground, one by one. The woman spun toward the exit, yelling at the remaining men to stay alert, but it was too late. Her words were drowned by the rapid gunfire that cut through the warehouse. The woman tried to fire back, but she was hit in the shoulder, falling to the ground with a scream. Her gun clattered to the floor as she was struck again, and within seconds she was silenced, her life snuffed out in an instant. Tasha's heart was pounding in her chest, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she struggled to make sense of the chaos around her. She heard the rapid footfalls of the men who had been standing at the edges of the room, their lives snuffed out in a matter of moments. A few of the remaining men tried to escape, but they didn't get far. In the midst of the violence, Tasha's body trembled uncontrollably. She couldn't process what was happening, the flashes of gunfire, the sounds of screams, and the sudden, shocking silence that followed. Her mind raced. She needed to escape to survive, but she was still bound to the chair, her hands aching from the ropes. Panic clawed at her chest, but then something shifted in the air. A hand. A warm, strong hand gripped hers, and she was yanked forward, the ropes that had held her loosened with precision. She blinked in disbelief, still reeling from what had just happened, and then her eyes locked with the person standing before her. The man who had sat in the diner, the one with the tattoo. He was standing in front of her, his face now illuminated by the dim light in the warehouse. His black leather jacket was now a bit more disheveled, and his gun was still in his hand, but it wasn't pointed at her. His presence was overwhelming. Tasha's heart skipped a beat and her mind struggled to make sense of it all. "You," she gasped, her voice raw and shaking. She couldn't believe it. The man she had seen only hours ago in the diner, the same one who had the tattoo just like her mother's, was standing in front of her now, his dark eyes focused entirely on her. He didn't speak immediately, but instead, he reached down and untied the final knot around her wrists. "Are you okay?" His voice was low, steady, but there was an undeniable urgency in his tone. He grabbed a bottle of water from one of the men nearby and handed it to her. "Here," he said softly. Tasha took the water, but her hands were still shaking. What's going on? Who are you?" Her mind was a whirl of confusion and fear. How was he involved in this? Was he connected to the Mafia, or was he something else entirely? He glanced over at one of the men beside him. His boys, she realized, as they guarded the perimeter of the warehouse. Then, after a long pause, he turned his gaze back to her. "My name is Vince," he said, his tone low. "Vince Moretti." Tasha froze, her mind struggling to piece it all together. Vince Moretti. The name was like a hammer to her chest. She had heard the name in passing, in whispers, in conversations she wasn't supposed to hear. The Mafia boss, the man her mother had tried to escape, the man her mother had once loved. Her breath hitched. "Vince Moretti," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. You're the Mafia boss." Vince nodded, but there was no pride in his eyes, only the weight of regret. "Yes, I didn't want this life for you, Tasha. I didn't want to pull you into it, but it seems I don't have a choice now." Tasha's head spun. "But how do we know each other? My mother never said anything about you, not even a word. She kept you hidden from me, and now you're here saving me." Her voice trembled, and the more she tried to understand, the more she felt the pieces slipping through her fingers. "Why? What's going on?" Vince's face softened, the hardness that usually accompanied him momentarily gone. "Your mother. She was part of my world. She tried to leave me. I thought I'd lost her. I didn't know you existed until recently, Tasha. I'm sorry. I should have done more to protect you both." Tasha felt as though the ground had been ripped from beneath her. Her father. She couldn't process the words, but they still crashed into her. You're my father," she whispered, the words tasting foreign on her tongue. Vince lowered his gaze, the regret in his eyes deeper than she had ever imagined. "Yes, I'm sorry I couldn't be there sooner." The weight of his words settled heavily on Tasha's chest. For years, she had wondered about the man who had abandoned her and her mother. Now, it turned out that man was a notorious Mafia boss, the very same one her mother had tried to escape. The silence between them stretched on, broken only by the distant hum of the warehouse. Then Vince stepped back and motioned toward the door. "We need to leave. It's not safe here anymore." Tasha stood, still shaky but resolute. There were so many questions, So many pieces to this broken puzzle, but right now, survival was all that mattered. She followed Vince as he led her out of the warehouse, the weight of everything she had just learned crashing down on her. As they reached his car, she hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "How do you know my mother? How do you know about me?" Vince opened the door, and as he helped her into the car, he hesitated before answering, his voice thick with emotion. "I wasn't there when you needed me, Tasha, but I'm here now. I'm sorry it took this long." Tasha stared out of the window, the city lights flashing by as they sped away. Her mind was a blur of emotions: shock, disbelief, anger, and a deep sadness for the mother she never truly knew. She wanted answers, but right now, she was too exhausted to process it all. She was finally starting to understand the truth, but the truth came with a price. The mansion was a sprawling estate, hidden away from the bustling city, perched on the edge of a cliff overlooking the sea. The walls inside were decorated with expensive paintings, antique furniture, and intricate tapestries. The space felt both imposing and lonely, echoing with the weight of the life Vincent had built for himself. The soft glow of the chandeliers cast a gentle light over the room, but the air felt heavy, too heavy for Tasha. She sat on a plush velvet couch in the living room, her eyes fixed on the floor, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. Vincent stood across from her, his posture rigid, his face lined with years of regret. His usual tough exterior had cracked. There was no arrogance in his eyes, only pain and self-loathing. Tasha had so many questions, so many emotions swirling inside her. But at this moment, all she could do was listen. "I failed her," Vincent's voice cracked, his words barely above a whisper. "I failed your mother, Tasha. I left her to fight my enemies alone. The worst part is I knew what kind of world I was leaving her in, but I thought I could protect her by staying away. I thought I could keep you both safe by keeping my distance, but I was wrong. I should have been there. I should have fought for her." Tasha could hear the guilt in his voice, thick and heavy. She wanted to feel anger, but instead, she felt a deep sense of confusion and betrayal. She had always thought of her mother as a strong woman, someone who had shielded her from the darkness of the world. But now, everything was crumbling, and her father, the man who should have been there, was the one who had abandoned her mother to face the dangers alone. Tasha looked up, her voice trembling. "How did you know I was kidnapped?" The question had been eating at her since the moment she had been rescued from the warehouse. She needed answers. Vincent's eyes darkened and he sighed deeply, rubbing his temples as if the answer pained him more than the weight of the world ever could. "Your mother's friend, Maya," he began, the name tasting bitter on his tongue. "She was the one who set you up." Tasha's heart skipped a beat. "Maya, but she's the one who's always been there for me. She said she was my mother's closest friend. Her voice trailed off as her mind struggled to comprehend what she was hearing. Vincent's eyes met hers, a sharp, painful truth in his gaze. "Maya was never just your mother's friend, Tasha. She belonged to my enemies, my rivals in the Mafia. She worked for them. She thought that if they kidnapped you, I'd be forced to surrender to them. They figured they could use you to control me. But I'm here now, and I'm not going to let that happen." Tasha's world tilted, the ground beneath her feet suddenly shifting. Maya, the person she had trusted, the one who had always been there when she felt like she had no one, was the very person who had orchestrated her kidnapping. She was a traitor. A cold, sharp pain shot through Tasha's chest as the realization hit her. Betrayal. Maya had been playing both sides, and Tasha had been the pawn. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. She had always considered Maya a mother figure, the one person who had cared for her when her mother had passed. And now, she was the one who had set her up. It was too much. Tasha's chest tightened, and the tears that had been threatening to fall finally spilled over. I don't understand. Why would she do this?" Her voice cracked, her heart breaking all over again. She sobbed, her shoulders trembling as she leaned forward, clutching her hands together in an attempt to stop herself from falling apart. Vincent moved toward her slowly, but Tasha pulled away, her face streaked with tears. "Don't touch me," she cried, the pain and anger mixing in her voice. "How could you let this happen? How could you let her do this to me? How could you? You're my father and I never even knew you." Vincent's face softened, the rawness of his emotion evident. He knelt in front of her trying to reach for her, but she recoiled, unable to accept the comfort he offered. "Tasha, please. I'm sorry I failed you. I failed your mother, but I will not fail you again. I'm here now. I'm here to protect you no matter what it takes." Tasha couldn't listen anymore. The betrayal, the lies, it was all too much. She couldn't stay in this world that had lied to her for so long. She couldn't stay in this mansion, surrounded by wealth and power that meant nothing compared to the truth she had just learned. "I'm sorry," she whispered through her tears, pushing away from Vincent's hand. "You can't be my father. I don't want you. I don't want any of this." Without another word, she stood, walking toward the door, but Vincent stood up quickly and blocked her path. "Tasha, don't," he pleaded, his voice low, desperate. "You don't understand. This world is dangerous, but I'm trying to give you everything I couldn't give your mother, everything she wanted for you." But Tasha couldn't hear him anymore. She didn't want his protection. She didn't want to be a part of this world, no matter how much he wanted to shield her. "Let me go, Vincent," she said, her voice breaking. "I need to be alone." Vincent didn't try to stop her this time. He gave a subtle nod, his heart breaking as she walked away. He ordered one of his men to take her to a room, a guest room, he told them, one that was more than comfortable. He could give her everything, comfort, luxury, safety, but he knew that none of it would matter if she couldn't forgive him. As Tasha entered the room, she couldn't look at her father. She sat on the edge of the bed, her thoughts consumed with everything she had just learned. But one thing was certain now: her mother's death, the Mafia, and the truth that had been hidden from her. It was all part of a bigger game. A game that she was now in the middle of. The following morning, Tasha woke up, still feeling the weight of everything that had happened. She sat at the edge of the bed, her mind made up. She couldn't stay here, hiding in this mansion, pretending that nothing had changed. She stood and walked to the door, determined. The world outside was brutal, unforgiving, but Tasha had no choice now. As she approached the door, she turned around and faced Vincent, who was waiting for her. "I want to join the Mafia," she said, her voice steady but resolute. "I want to take revenge for my mother's death." Vincent stared at her, stunned, his expression unreadable. Tasha's heart was cold with resolve. She wasn't the same girl who had walked into that diner. She was someone new, someone forged in the fire of betrayal and loss. And she was going to make them pay. What will happen now that Tasha is ready to fight back? What's next for her and Vincent? Stay tuned. Subscribe and leave a comment with your thoughts on this dramatic turn of events.